Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you. So, the last couple of these, I've really tried to be more positive. That's going to be real hard this time. Survivors of the Flux. Here was the weird thing going into this one. Upon watching it, I remembered nearly everything that happened in it. Before starting up the episode and trying to think, wait, what was it that happened in this episode? I couldn't remember a damn thing. And that's less a case of none of it sticking in my brain. Because as I said, as I saw all of it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember this. I remember this. But like, it's so indistinct that trying to figure out that any of this happened specifically in this episode, it just fell out of my brain. This episode is basically nothing but exposition dump after exposition dump after exposition dump. And some of the exposition dumps are in the very literal sense, like with Tectayun expositing all about division and everything else to the Doctor. Some of it is slightly better played exposition dumps as what it really is ultimately what all the stuff with the Grand Serpent is. It's just explaining why he's here. Sort of. I still don't get why he's like logistically. I mostly get how he's here. I don't get why he's okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. This one's a mess. And it is a mess. I was going to say on the order of Halloween Apocalypse, it might actually be worse. We'll see what I think when I see the next episode, but this might be the worst episode of this series, the worst episode of Flux, because you know, as much of a mess as Halloween Apocalypse is, and it is a mess, I at least get that for everything that's going to be going on, which is way too much. There are tons of plots that just should have been excised. But for everything that is going on, like, I at least get why that's a mess. And then you have War of the Sontarans, which has some fun in it. And then you have Once Upon a Time, which had way more positive qualities than I remembered it being, without actually crossing over into good. And Village of the Angels, once I knew that I didn't like the ending already, I was able to zoom in and focus on how much did work with the atmosphere and the guest performances, most of them. So, like, I was still finding stuff to be like, oh, okay. And then we get to this, and it's like, oh, God. I said I was trying. I'm trying to find the good in this. And it's not completely devoid of good. It's not 100% absence. Just, you know, the good is about 90% absent, at a guess. Because honestly, like, I kind of enjoy the companions. The rollicking, globe-trotting, Indiana Jones-style adventure that Dan, Yaz, and Professor Jericho are on. I kind of wish that was the whole episode. Because I'm just enjoying their dynamic. I'm liking the way that they bounce off each other. And it's just a general feel and kind of a niche genre that I just like. I like rollicking, globe-trotting, treasure hunting, adventure stuff. I like Indiana Jones. I like the Brendan Fraser Mummy. Like, I like that stuff. I just do. So that's fun and entertaining. And as has happened, honestly, across all of her appearances, another few moments of actually doing quite a good job at characterizing Yaz, which continues to make me frustrated that she wasn't given the central place of prominence way before Power of the Doctor, and she should have been the only companion, I'd say, since series 12. But definitely for this, as much as Dan I actually kind of like, he's a nice person, but like there's these moments where we get good characterization on Yaz, and then I'm like, and they could have really drilled into that. Here, there's just, so they're on this ship, and somebody comes and tries to kill them. It's implied that they work for the Grand Serpent. How he knows they're even in this timeline, or what they're doing, or that they should die, I don't remember ever getting established. But regardless, somebody's trying to kill them, and they take this guy out, and they're like, well, what do we do with this? And Yaz just very coldly,
then come nightfall when it's quiet, shove his body overboard. What?
And again, that sort of very tactically minded, that sort of knuckling down and going, okay, I enjoy what we do, but right now this is not fun. This is business. This is work. This is get the job done. And there's that, and like just the moments of her tapping into what was very clearly a lot of her police training just really gives Yaz a nice texture and layer as a character that we largely just get in glimpses, because she doesn't ever really get a proper highlight across all of her time. See, even the stuff that I kind of like, I have a hard time talking about without it reminding me of other stuff that I don't like. And look, as much of a cliche, it's weird to say cliche because it's subversive, but it's been done so often that it's a very unsubversive subversion of like the ancient wise person on some remote place, like actually being, very affable and wanting to know the latest gossip. And, if it had not been set at the turn of the 20th century, he would have been going, hey, do you need to jump on the Wi-Fi? Like, that's what the joke would have been. As much as that has kind of become like a bottom of the barrel, really easy, low-hanging fruit of subversion, I still have fun with it. And the guy who was playing this kind of seer, like, he was clearly having fun with it.
I don't get to tease people much.
So, while I can't claim that it's good, and it's certainly not original material, it's still fun. I enjoy that. And again, tying into the companions jumping around back in 1904. They don't really say who the hell they left Peggy with from the previous episode, the little kid who's going to be stuck growing into the old woman in that damn village. They don't really cover where she is. Not that I expected her to tag along. I don't. But like, just a line accounting for where she ended up. So that's honestly kind of the strongest material I can give you. Oh, the tunnel guy, the Liverpool tunnel guy, whose name is escaping me. He finally has a purpose, because we realize that there's all these different doors within the tunnels, and they go different places, different times, different worlds. But now in the wake of the Flux, they have changed. And like, this is largely a plot contrivance. This largely exists to be able to solve some things later, and to allow some things to connect to each other that otherwise they don't have a means to get to each other. Because as Calvinist himself points out, even when he spots the message that is intended for him,
I don't have time travel, you idiot.
I can't actually do anything with that information. I still like Calvinist a fair bit. His grouchiness is actually quite endearing to me. I enjoy him. But we have this guy down in the tunnels, and he's finally given a purpose, but he's also given a moment of actual humanization. Because up to this point, he's just been the weird guy obsessed with tunnels, just wandering around out of time intermittently. He just keeps showing up and then vanishing, and he's just gruff and annoyed with everybody. But then when Yaz says what it is that she understands is going on, the relief on his face.
Finally.
That's actually a real great moment. That's kind of a powerful moment. Like, they actually gave the actor something to act, as opposed to, just generic, be grouchy. No, he genuinely tapped into something very human there. And again, in a way that I feel like you could have given at least half an episode over to really digging into this guy. There's stuff going on with him that is interesting and that the actor can clearly bring forward. But there isn't time, so it doesn't happen. The Grand Serpent. So, why is he here? And I mean that both kind of somewhat logistically, but also massively as a meta narrative thing. Why is he here? Because I'm still. There's a lot of. In the wake of all of the frickin' exposition. The worst expo dumps being from the Dr. Hologram to Yaz, which does also have some good moments. I'll come back to that in a second. But also between Tectayun and the Doctor, with all of this exposition, it is delivered so flatly that I have a really hard time absorbing it. And virtually none of it is backed up by actual visualization and plot points. It's just stuff that's said. So I think between what the two of them said, they kind of cover for why a bunch of people are displaced from time and space and where they're supposed to be. And I think that's meant to cover for the Grand Serpent and why he is in the time period we see him. It doesn't really work, though, because everything about the way he's presented and his framing and his performance isn't, I don't know how I ended up here and I'm making the best of it. It's, I'm here with purpose and a plan. Why? How? Like, if they're trying to have it be like he's just trying to make the best of a bad situation, that's not brought across. Because again, everything about the performance is brought in at that level that's like, yes, everything's going according to my plan. I've been plotting this for a long time. And I actually feel kind of bad bagging on the Grand Serpent story because I mentioned this when he got introduced an episode or two ago. Dude's got good presence. He's got good villainous presence. I actually think he could have been a really good villain if he was allowed to be the main villain of not even necessarily this story, just of something. I think he could have been real good. And I actually even kind of like that we've got this sort of bumbling, upper crust, posh, sort of failing upwards type that he attaches himself to. He's like, oh yes, it's jolly exciting, isn't it? Oh, all this alien stuff. You know, the kind of person who gets a position of power simply because of who they're related to, probably, and has no business in that job. And just as soon as he meets someone he thinks is close to his class level and knows what they're doing, he's very happy to just shunt off responsibility as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Do you think so? Yes, I must admit I'm a little at sea. It's not my area of expertise.
Honestly, yeah, especially in the early days of Unit, when it wouldn't have been taken that seriously. Yeah, I buy that. That works. And as I said, the Grand Serpent himself, his performance is solid. He's got a good intimidation factor. I do like him, but I don't get why he's here. There's the logistical thing. Like I mentioned, I don't get why he's here. But there's also just the meta narrative. I don't understand why there are 4 villains. 5, kind of. 4.5? 4.5 villains to this 6-part thing. 4.5 villains and a cataclysmic event. So, Swarm and Azure, that's 1. And yes, I'm counting 2 as 1, because like functionally they're 1 character. So there's Swarm and Azure, there's Tectayun and Division, there's the Grand Serpent, there's the Sontarans. There's your 4. I'll give you another half for the Weeping Angels. They are working for Division, but they get enough of a highlight. I'll count them as their own kind of half thing and actually add it up to a total of 5 by putting the cataclysmic event of the Flux itself as the other half. So there's effectively, by the weird math, I've decided I'm going to do like 5 villains in this thing. Why? What? Well, we know why, because this was supposed to have more episodes than it did, and it got cut down, and they scrambled to try and rework it, and they didn't have the time to massage this properly. I think given more time, especially considering a lot of these parts probably had been cast already, given more time, they might have sat down and realized, okay, there's actually huge stuff we just need to excise from this. Like, we need to ditch either the Grand Serpent or Swarm and Azure, because there's no, well, it's debatable whether there's point to either of them being there, but there's definitely no reason for them to both be there. especially when Division is actually following up on stuff we've done and is laid out at this point in this episode as the actual cause of the flux. So Division, Tecteun, cool. It's following up on stuff from the end of the previous series, stuff I don't like, but it should still be followed up on. There's a reason she's there. There's a reason Division is there. They caused the flux. Cool. Consider that mandatory. The Sontarans taking advantage doesn't dominate so much of the narrative and is kind of fun. I'm like, you maybe could have gotten away with that one. But Swarm and Azure and the Grand Serpent, why? I mean, why are they here? Why? Especially, I'm just jumping around at this point. Follow me if you can. Especially considering that towards the end, Swarm and Azure just wander into the exposition room and kill Tecteun and take over the story for the last episode. What was the point of bringing back and trying to in any way characterize Tecteun, which isn't done very well? Not because the actress isn't good. She's selling it the best that she can, but because she's only there to give exposition and there's very little time to actually characterize her as anything other than vaguely villainous. You can practically hear somebody from just off screen going, okay, that's all the explanation we need from her. Kill her now, please. Get her off the screen. And like, I don't like the idea of, well, the Timeless Child at all. I don't like the idea of Tecteun. I don't think she works, but she is by far the most valid villain for this piece. She's the one who has the history with the Doctor. I mean, history that we don't actually know, so that supposed history that we're told exists is actually functionally meaningless and doesn't exist. But in theory, she has the most direct history to the Doctor. She directly ties into the thing you ended the previous series with. She's tied to Division, which the Doctor had kicked off this thing looking for. She's responsible for the flux. And if you're going to ever try and sell this idea of the Doctor's mother betrayed her, then you need to take the time to make this a proper character and sell us on that, because they still are trying the way it's presented. And she goes, I am Tecteun. And it's treated like a big deal, like,
I'm Tecteun.
lady, we heard your name for the first time like 5 or 6 episodes ago. That was the first time we'd heard it ever. And since then, we've gotten no fill-in on you. You are a name. You are a concept. We know nothing about you. We're not invested in you. You can say this all day long, but the show has not made us care about who Tecteun is. So they just shows us and goes, I'm Tecteun. Like, okay, so you're that thing that I remember being brought up that annoys me. But she has a lot more validity to be the villain. And you could have done more, her scenes in here are an exposition dump, but with that out of the way, you could have actually done something proper with her as a character exploration, as just getting some actual relationship between her and the Doctor, a proper one, in the next episode. But nope, she's dead now, so that Swarm and Azure can be our closing villains. And while I've slightly defended, softball kind of defended, Swarm and Azure in previous episodes, saying, the design's kind of cool and the performances are solid given how unnecessary and arch they are. And I stand by that, but that doesn't make them the correct villains for this story. And they're still talking these weird, vague terms. They've got all these people around these batteries and they're like,
You are space, and we are time.
It's all these vagaries. And like, I can work with vague, unexplained stuff, especially in Doctor Who. Sometimes I wish there was more of it, but like, I don't get what's going on, or why they care, or why they're free, or why we had the flashback with them before, why their previous stuff on the planet called time, but they themselves are also worshiping time, but they say they are time. And like, it's starting to sound like Kingdom Hearts. The Heartless, they take your heart and then they move without a heart, and your heart is given to darkness. Darkness, nobody, darkness, heartless heart. That's what it's starting to sound like. It's exhausting and exasperating. And there's just like, I kind of let go the plot contrivance of the tunnels, because like, at least we get a decent character beat for the one guy. It's the only one he gets, really. But There's also the absolute complete contrivance of the stragglers are centering on Earth and the Flux will end at Earth. Why? Earth matters to the Doctor. Why does Earth matter to everybody frickin' else? This is actually part of the problem I have with how much of modern day Who either takes place on or is in some other way centered around Earth and humans. I know oftentimes it's a logistical, even budgetary thing because it's just easier to make this stuff work if you don't have to build, intricate space station or otherworldly sets all the damn time. I do get that logistically, but like, I just think back to, say, Series 4 with the stolen planets, and Earth ends up being one of them. Like, thankfully, at least there's enough of them that it's like, okay, that's just bad luck. Earth happens to be one of them. And of course, it's the last one that has, it's always, it just happens to be Earth. Just happens to be Earth. This alien species could have executed this plan that they're doing on any planet, but it happens to be Earth. The Flux could have ended anywhere. It happens to be Earth. It's just seeing the hand of the author and trying to force it to be more dramatic. And we also get laid out the fact that a lot of the universe is missing and destroyed. And I'm going to try and focus really hard on seeing if because like, to my memory, that doesn't get fixed, but it also doesn't get addressed. So I got to keep an eye on that for next time. That's assuming I can even follow it. Because, like, I need a flow chart. I need a week and I need a week and 5 conspiracy boards to make sense of this thing. It's just all these stories stepping on each other, and a lot of which could have been decent in and of themselves. There were glimmers and glimpses of decent stuff in here, and even decent complete character and story arcs. Vinder comes back just to be caught and tossed into passenger for no reason. And Dai is still in there for no established reason. Like, we know that the Ravagers kind of tormented Dan with the fact that they had her, but they're not actually leveraging that for anything. And how did they know that she was tied to him? And why do they care? And why, like, hey, yeah. Trying to make sense of this thing hurts my head. Because it's just, it's trying so hard to establish everything that needs to be established, from the previous 4 episodes in order to get us to the finale. But since there's so many things that shouldn't be here at all, that either should have been streamlined, excised, or otherwise simplified and condensed, but it's all still here, then we just have an episode trying desperately to make it all make sense, but you can't. You can't, not in the time you have. If Flux was, as an overall thing, was ever going to work, it needs minimum 2 more full episodes than it has. And that's bare minimum. I would say it needs 3. But it didn't have them. And while I would say possibly with the exception of Halloween Apocalypse, because that one was largely a setup episode, but at the very least, the 3 between that one and this, we're still trying to give a story, a narrative. I mean, the thinnest one was Once Upon a Time, but it was still trying to tell some story elements and actually give us, something, some kind of resolution within, to some degree, what was going on within that episode. And then War of the Sontarans and Village of the Angels are close-ish to stand alone, or at least sizable aspects of them are. This isn't trying to do anything other than info dump. I said I was going to come back to Yaz and the Doctor hologram. Again, when it's not just the Doctor dropping exposition, some nice little character moments for the Doctor, for Yaz. And by this point, they knew they were working their way towards actually shipping these 2. And as far as groundwork for that goes, it's solid enough, I suppose. But it's a nice moment, aside from the clunky exposition that Jodie's stuck with. I feel really bad for Jodie Whittaker. Because when she's allowed to actually act, when she's allowed to actually be a character and not just the person asking what's going on or telling everyone else what's going on, when she's allowed to actually be a character and not an exposition machine, she's really good. But she is called upon to just deliver the exposition and explain the story that you're watching so often, including in this. She's either explaining it or she's prompting Tecteun to explain it. She is used as a vehicle for exposition way more than she's actually allowed to be a character. And it's a real shame. Because when she is allowed to be a character, she's good. She's a lot better than the material she was given. And it's a shame. That's just where I'm at with this one. I suppose in some ways I did find some good to talk about it. Just I couldn't talk about it as its own thing. Like, here's the good, here's the bad. The good is all stymied and not allowed to be as good as it could have been because of all the bad that it ties into. This one hurt. This one hurt to watch. I would say of the 5 that I've seen, I've got one more to go to finish the Flux rewatch. Of the 5 that I've seen, this one was the one that hurt to revisit. And I say that as someone who, like, hasn't really super enjoyed most of the rewatch, but, finding some stuff that I'm like, oh, okay, there is some good there. And even, like, being disappointed rewatching War of the Sontarans and realizing the stuff I liked was not nearly as high a percentage of the episode as my memory said that it was. Even with that disappointment in there, like, there was still stuff I could find. And even Halloween Apocalypse, at the very least, was introducing stuff that I could still be like, yeah. Like I mentioned, Dan's introduction, way better than I remembered it being. Calvinista's fun. There's some good stuff in there. There's so little of the good stuff in here, and there isn't a single beat of good stuff in this episode that it isn't in some way having its potential stamped on by the lumbering behemoth that is this overarching plot. This overstuffed, undercooked mess is suffocating what good there is in this. And it's really frustrating. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it got this negative again. I was actually feeling really good about the fact that I managed to make the last 2 of these more positive than I was expecting to. I felt really good about that. And I wanted to do that here. I can't, though. I can't even really get mad about it. Because it's not bad in the kind of way that infuriates me, like Hellbent or The Timeless Children does. Or even, the kind of deeply offensive that I find something like The Idiot's Lantern. It's not any of those. It's just a mess. It is the epitome of, I'm not mad, I'm just really disappointed. Survivors of the Flux. You rewatched this one lately? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. It enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out there, there's links down in the description for other things that I do. I have merch. I'm on other platforms, etc., etc. Don't worry too much about it, though. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meeting. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Massive thanks to my Patreon supporters, and in particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabilax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thanks for your support. You can get your name in the credits too if you feel like hearing me possibly struggle with it for several times before getting it right.